Hi everyone, I'm Joshua Orro, the Mustang Prince. Welcome to Mustang Prince Orro Reports. Now today I'm going to be blogging a really, nutty film that I really wanted to blog a few months ago while I was in theaters. But back then I couldn't get the chance to do so because of one little cell tumor in my left leg. But now that my leg is all better, and that the film that I'm going to be talking about has been on DVD since April, I think it's best to finally get this film over with today, with my own personal thoughts. So, here we go. Released on January 17th, 2014, the movie is The Nut Job. Okay, here we go. In a city park, Sterling the squirrel has finally gone too far with his latest caper, leading to the animal community's winter food cache being destroyed. Now exiled, Sterling and his rat buddy's collective nightmare on the streets ends when they discover a nut store to raid. Meanwhile, the squirrels, the heroic Andy and the ditzy Grayson, are charged by Raccoon to find a new food source, and Andy runs into Surly. With no other option, she arranges a deal to help in Surly's heist for the colony, even while Surly fully intends to betray it. However, there is more going on with the nut store being a front for bank robbers, while Raccoon has his own agenda to ensue his own power. In the mayhem to come, Surly finds himself challenged in ways he's never expected and discovers the real prize and treasure in this adventure. So, what are my thoughts on Nut Job? Well, I had mixed feelings about it at first, before I saw the movie in theaters, but afterwards I found it to be quite enjoyable. I mean, I feel like I really shouldn't have doubted it. However, I feel like its story seems a bit way too familiar. I mean, it kind of seems like it reminds me of another film. Maybe this one. But instead of forest animals stealing food from a neighborhood, it's about park animals stealing nuts from one store. I mean, still it's an enjoyable film, but it's not great, but still good in its own way, though. And why do I like it? Let's move on to Mustang notes and find out. This film is based on Peter Lepeniotis' 2005 short animated film, Surly Squirrel, which is included on the DVD. So, in a way, you could say that Nut Job could be considered a remake to the short, but with improved animation and no adult language in it, though. And a different story. But anyway, let's move on. With a budget of $42.8 million, it's the most expensive animated film co-produced in South Korea. On December 19, 2013, it was announced that South Korean entertainment Psy would be making a cameo appearance as himself during the film's end credits. Which featured his hit song Gangnam Style. What I thought about that part was like the best end credits since DreamWorks Madagascar. Plus, a lot of the stuff that goes on in the film was really hilariously crazy. Almost like they were taken from several Looney Tunes cartoons. Also, just to note, I did discover that a sequel titled Nut Job 2 is scheduled to be released on January 15th, 2016. I wonder how that will turn out, though. Now to move on to voices. Now, I'll only be talking about the animal characters, not the robbers. Our main character, Surly, is voiced by Will Arnett. who I remember as the missing link from Monsters vs. Aliens and Mr. Perkins from Despicable Me. Now this guy I find to be a really interesting character. I mean, sure that Surly can act like a greedy squirrel who wants every nut for himself, but underneath it all, he just wants to be an independent squirrel, kind of like me when I feel like an outcast at times. And plus, Surly is pretty cool, and he's also very smart and clever. Buddy is Surly's best friend and rap partner. He doesn't really talk mostly throughout the film. However, he is voiced by Robert Tinkler, but with only one line in it. As for what I thought of Buddy, his smiles are kind of creepy at times, but there's something I find lovable and loyal about him at the same time. You know, kind of like any best friend would. Grayson is voiced by Brendan Fraser. Who's been in films like The Mummy, George of the Jungle, and Looney Tunes Back in Action. As for Grayson himself, he's an incompetent eastern gray squirrel who's considered to be the part hero. However, I just don't see him much of a hero. I mean, I see him mostly as a guy who would usually let his heroism go to his head and make him act like a pussy at times. Also, I can't help but realize that Grayson's voice is almost similar to another so-called hero Brendan Fraser voiced as last year. Ugh, what a doofus that guy was. Next up is Andy, who's voiced by Katherine Heigl. She's a compassionate red squirrel who seems to try to help Surly fit in with the rest of the other critters. And, she's my favorite character in the movie. I mean, she's smart, and she's, like, brave, and also she's very compassionate, and it's also looking to be eager to help anyone, especially Surly. Next up are the Bruisers, Jimmy, Johnny, and Jamie, a trio of groundhogs voiced by Gabriel Iglesias, Joe Pingu, and Anna Oboasin. These guys are like a few of the funniest characters in the movie, and that's all I gotta say about them, though. Mole is voiced by Jeff Dunhar, and never heard of him. Anyway, this guy works for Raccoon, and like all moles, he's an animal who can't stand light. But I also find the way he talks is kind of funny. Especially since, he has to, even when the sort of hijinks he causes when sabotaging the hose. My other favorite character, Precious, is voiced by Maya Rudolph. She's a pug owned by the robbers who side with Surly in order to help with their heist. And while I'm not much of a dog person, I find that Precious is as hilarious as some of the other critters. Although I just didn't think that she was a girl at first, because usually pugs can look kind of male-ish, though. Don't judge me, though. But also, I would never use a dog whistle on a dog like her. And lastly, our animal villain, Raccoon, is voiced by Liam Neeson. Raccoon is a con artist and a self-proclaimed leader of the park community, if you can actually call him one. He seems to believe that less food will mean more control, and that's really kind of heartless. While Liam Neeson knows how to be villainous in a lot of the other films he's been in, like Batman Begins and several others, there's a lot of things that he can find him a little bit threatening, but there's one other part of Raccoon that I finally kind of despise about. which is his cardinal sidekick, makes me think of something that I hated at first glance. Can't people just stop with the Angry Bird references? I mean, Rio was good enough to do that. Now let's finish this off with my final words. Above all, Nut Job really isn't the greatest animated film of the year, but it's not terrible either. It's still very entertaining, and I liked a few of the characters. And while the story may seem too familiar, it's not so bad mixed with the comedy and the animation. So I'm going to give this film a rating of 63%. Well, that's all for today, people. So, hope you enjoyed this episode after it's long overdue. So, be sure to join me next time. Mustang Power!